Hi everyone, this is the Oxford and Cambridge project, the podcast that aims to make Oxbridge accessible by lifting the veil on the secrets of two of the most prestigious universities in the world. I'm Opportune Simon.
And I'm Cleopatra Cipriano. So today we've got Callum with us. Callum is currently working in business operations at a tech recruitment startup. He graduated from Trinity College in 2017 with a first-class degree in English and stayed on to complete an MPhil in modern and contemporary literature the following year. Callum grew up in Hackney, East London, where he attended a state school before getting a scholarship at a private sixth form. Initially planning to study law, he was inspired by a teacher to follow his interest in literature and keep his future career options open. During his time at Cambridge, he was involved with Varsity, Cambridge's student-run weekly newspaper, including a stint as editor, shot and directed a number of film projects, and helped establish a travel startup.
Hi Callum.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I mean, this sounds like an amazing journey and a really exciting time at Cambridge.
Absolutely, yeah, lots of nostalgia.
It's interesting that you were considering to do law and then changed to English, which is a bit of a less traditional subject, or maybe it's not, you're not exactly sure what you'll go into after English, like what occupation. So it'd be good to hear about that as well.
Yeah, can you tell us to start off more about your background, your time in high school and, well, I guess sixth form, and just why you made that decision to not go into law but do English?
Yeah, absolutely. So I changed schools when I was 16 and went to a more academic sixth form. And at that time I was trying to keep my options open as much as possible. I think I studied English, history, music and German, so trying to keep a nice humanities spread there. And I've been told by a lot of people law was a good degree to go for. And I had a little bit of interest. I watched a few TV shows, had that sort of background.
Suits?
that intrigued me. Yeah, exactly, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And Silk, I think, which is the BBC one as well. But I had a really inspiring English teacher. And I remember it was like the first essay I handed in to him when I was just new at the school. And he wrote at the bottom, have you considered studying English at university?
Wow.
And I just never considered it an option for me.
Yeah.
Not because I didn't enjoy it, but I hadn't really thought of the reality of doing it and the fact that could then leave many doors open to me. And I thought if I wanted to do law in the future, I could always do my undergrad and then convert. And everyone told me that was a much better decision. That was really the background.
Cool. And does that teacher know about your story? Did he know that
absolutely.
He was the determinant choice?
Hilariously, I think in my second year of university, he was actually walking up a street in Cambridge completely randomly, and I bumped into him and told him. So that was a really nice moment.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good when you have teachers that are able to inspire you and sort of lead you in the right direction, and not just that traditional way that, when you're 16, 17, you can only think of a few occupations most of the time. So it's good to have your options open. I
think it also means a huge amount for someone to reach out to you, and say, hey, I know you well, I can see what you can do, I really think you'd be good at this. It's such a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
So that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, sounds like it was the right decision.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't do law in the end, right? So.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I feel like we also need to raise this. You had an outstanding achievement in your exam results at Cambridge. I know that's not the be all and end all, but you did amazingly well in your course. I think you topped the tripos in one of the years.
In my second year, yeah.
In your second year. Yeah. So, and you also graduated from your Master in Philosophy after your bachelor with a distinction. So you did amazingly well.
Yeah,
I guess
I
it was a great choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I can talk more about this. I found, whilst I was at sixth form, I found that English was something that I could really, become fascinated with, I guess. I was going to say obsessed with, but I think that's probably the wrong But I think for me, what I carried through my whole degree and my master's was the idea of finding something that really interested me. So for my master's, it was learning about Samuel Beckett and his time in Germany, which is something that a lot of people hadn't thought about. And to really want to become a master at that, to understand as much as possible about that. And that was something that was kind of gifted to me when I was at school. My teachers really encouraged me to find a small number of really niche things.
I feel
and
like
really
that's
focus on them.
yeah, that's often the secret to, I guess, mastering Oxbridge, because I feel like you really need to go being like really passionate about the subject that you're applying for, and because you only have, you know, one shot at it, and that's just how you keep the motivation during the 3 years of study.
Yeah, and I'd also say, like, when people are applying and being interviewed, or, you know, the reality is that you're, as a 17-year-old, like, you're not going to be amazing at all parts of English. Like, the whole reason that you want to go and study at university is because you want to have a grounded knowledge in, you know, 800 years or 1,000 years of literature. I did that. I still don't have, like, you know, I tiptoed into lots of different areas, but I'm still not competent in many, many areas of that study. So I think, like, being able to show that you're really, really good at something very, very specific, and like that you've really gotten to like almost the limits of what you can find out about a certain topic. I think when I was applying, I found some document that a poet had written about like a death ceremony or something really like esoteric. And I like brought this up in my interview, and it showed that I'd like, yeah, again, gone to the depths of that particular period, and like really tried to find something that no one else had seen before.
Yeah.
And I think that is something Cambridge allows you to do. Obviously, you learn such a massive variety of topics, but then you do have that opportunity to focus on certain ones that you like, for example, during your dissertation as well, or even for your exams. You know, you don't have to answer every single question. You can focus on specific things. For example, I studied psychology, and it's okay to go in and have an idea whether you like more of the social side of it, or more the neuroscience, the biology, or statistics side of it, and that is fine to have a bit of a niche. But maybe to ask you how you chose Cambridge, or was it always in the plans?
You know, actually, that's a tough one. I can't exactly remember. I knew I wanted to give Oxbridge a shot, and I remember at school, English teachers always talking about the tragedy paper, which is like a big part of the English tripos. You do it in your third year. It's like you basically study tragedy across history, and it culminates in what can be one exam, a 3-hour question, and you know, pretty challenging task. But I remember everyone talking about that as being this amazing thing. So that, in a way, separated it from Oxford a little bit. I'd heard the course was a little bit more modern at Cambridge. I know at Oxford they do a little bit like earlier English. I think the Cambridge course you have to start in 1300, but Oxford it goes a little bit earlier. Okay. So that was also a factor for me. But I don't think there was like a massive decision, and I don't think there is a huge distinction between the courses. The courses might be a bit different, but you can take them in whatever direction you want. And
can you tell us more about your application?
Sure, yeah. So I remember doing, you know, as part of like a book group at school, and like every few weeks we'd like read a different book from a different historical period. And I was at that point just trying to really understand what topics I might be interested in like talking about in my personal statement or as part of my application. I think in the end I did try to show like knowledge in lots of different areas. I think I did something on like studying the wasteland, so that's quite nice to do some like 20th century stuff. I did some like Victorian literature to do a bit of that, and then I did some Renaissance stuff as well.
Nice mix.
To try and really like spread it out. But in each of those, like I tried to find a very specific, I think I did like a Hardy novel and like a very specific part of that. And,
so you went like above and beyond what you did at school, but then still kind of showed to everyone that you weren't lost in the mix and the variety, and you just focused on some bits that drew you out of the crowd.
I always thought of it like I wanted to have a few things in my back pocket that I could like take out and show that I'd like read. I think one of the most significant things, right, for an application, at least in English, I'm sure it's the same in other disciplines as well, is that you show that you've gone above and beyond in your research. If you're just doing the text you've learned at school, you've had no agency over those decisions. Like they want to show that you've actually gone out and tried to grapple with something really difficult. Doesn't mean you have to be a master at it or an expert or anything. Like I had some, you know, I know people who like thought they had to, like understand everything about the Renaissance, and it's just really, even Cambridge won't teach you that. So.
Yeah. So when you had your Cambridge interview, was that the first time you were visiting Cambridge? Or?
I'd done an open day, I think, before. And actually and I walked around all the colleges. It was very nice. I don't remember there being that much to... I don't think I could speak to anyone about the course or anything, but I'd done my research and read a lot online.
And is that what made you choose Trinity from seeing the college?
Yeah, a little bit. The Trinity was an interesting one. So a lot of people, when I got to Cambridge, were like, oh, they really researched why they picked a college and like were very specific about their reasons. And I didn't really do that. I think I went around, I think like I was slightly attracted to like the beautiful old college vibe. Like I knew I wanted to go to a college like that.
Yeah.
I like Trinity for a few reasons. I like the fact it was big. I think it's the second biggest in terms of student numbers. So
I thought it was the biggest.
I think Homerton has a few more like in terms of students, but
okay.
with or maybe undergrads. But like Trinity is a pretty big college. It has a really big English intake, which is quite rare. It's known to be a really mathsy, sciencey college, and like it's got, I think they have 10 a year for English, or at least when I started they did, which is really great because it means you get a large mix of people. Your seminars are great. And I really remember, like, when I looked at their page, I really liked the specialisms of the people who are lecturing. So I knew, the supervisors. I think there was someone who did Renaissance stuff around death rituals, which was my topic. And there was someone who did, like, Victorian novels as well. And I was like, this is perfect for me. Before I'd even actually, like, applied, I could see that my interests would align with theirs. And actually, like, I'm not sure how much this affects the overall process. I know there's lots of like checking and checks and balances that happen, but if you can like excite the person who will be teaching you for the next 3 years, that can be a really effective tool. If you're going to go and talk about something that has nothing, they don't have any understanding of, it's going to be much harder for you to have that conversation.
I think that's a nice tip to actually look at what the people teaching at the college or are affiliated with the college are actually interested in, what type of research they're doing. It's not necessary that you want to do that type of research as well, but it's a nice way to see if your interests are aligned and will they be covered by your college.
I would say, there's a really important, I don't think you should ever change your interests to match, I know you're not saying this.
No.
You should never change your interests to match the academics at a certain college. Like that'd be the wrong way around to do it. Yeah. But you want to make sure that the person who you're going to be talking to, and you can often know which supervisors will interview you, which fellows, and they will often try and match you with people who have similar interests. So that can be a really good way. Yeah. The other thing with Trinity was they've said that they taught us one-on-one from the first term, which a lot of colleges don't do.
Wow, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so Trinity did a lot of one-on-one supervision, and I think I had a lot of group stuff in the very beginning, but like it very quickly became one-on-one, which is unbelievable. Like it's terrifying, but like an amazing teaching experience.
How did you do it? I guess for anyone who's like listening to you right now and being like, oh my God, I cannot have a one-on-one supervision on something that I know next to nothing about in front of the expert in that field. How did you go about it?
So they don't chuck you in with that, which I think is really good. And I think it's often like the benefit of it is that you get to have a really in-depth discussion about something that you both have an interest in. It won't often like you won't be writing on something that person isn't a complete expert in. It might be that, I don't know, he's the guy who's really into like death, burial stuff, whatever. Like you might also write about another topic in the Renaissance that he has some like connection to. But it allows you, I think it really allows you to have an amazing, I got so much more out of those one-on-ones because when you strike a point that excites you both, you can have like an incredible conversation. I also had terrible supervisions as well. They happen.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember, I think on one-on-ones, it's amazing because you can't back out. You can't hide this next to like two other people and let them do the talking. You have to be prepared for that discussion and you have to be engaged during that discussion. So, but yeah, I mean, bad supervisions happen. People have bad days. Supervisors have bad days.
Yeah. I also think it really prepares you well for dissertations as well, because your dissertations will be one-on-one supervisions. Yeah. So getting used to that from an early stage, and like for me, it always encouraged me to try and find something interesting to bring to the supervision, to like kind of surprise the fellow or the supervisor, because like you're not going to beat them on like their home turf, but if you can find like some interesting document or like some interesting thing that's going to make them think, or that can be a really great incentive in a way to do it.
This is why you got it first. And this is why you also topped everyone else.
No, but I guess Cambridge introduces you early to that format of teaching, and that's why, well, one of the key reasons why you do have interviews at Oxbridge is because that is the format you'll have in the next 3-4 years, and they want to see if, how do you deal with that? Do you remember much about your interviews, and did you have like an assessment that you had to do during the day? Or
Yeah, I do. So I remember I stayed overnight because I wanted to be a bit more relaxed. I was quite nervous, and it was actually more terrifying to stay overnight because Trinity is a very imposing college. And
you stayed within Trinity?
Yeah. So they if you were coming more than 40 miles away or something, then you could stay overnight. And they gave me a room which one of my friends ended up having in first year, actually, which is quite funny. But this huge, like, student room. It was just a really terrifying experience. The porters were really imposing and scary. But ultimately, the next day came. I remembered 2 things about it. We did a test, which was fine. I don't remember much about that. It was pretty open in terms of questions. They just wanted to see what you could write in 45 minutes. It was a bit intimidating to be in a room of 60 people furiously writing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then the interviews. The first one I found quite intimidating because we'd all been told that there's a specific formula to how Cambridge English interviews are done. With one of the interviews, it's going to be an unseen. So they'll give you a text, you'll have half an hour to sit in the library and work on it, and then you have to go and discuss it. And I hadn't got any special instructions for this interview. I guessed it was that one, and I went to the door and I could hear the person before me talking, and was really intimidated because he sounded really smart. And he ended up getting in and coming to the college, so it was at least it wasn't and she just opened the door and said, "Come in." And I was like, have I forgotten something? I was really nervous that I'd missed part of the brief or whatever. And then she just put a poem in front of me and was like, "Let's talk about this right now." Wow. Which sounds terrifying, but actually, because there was no opportunity to prepare, I actually thought it was in a way a relief because everyone was on the same footing.
Yeah.
So you hadn't read that?
No.
You just
she was like, here are 2 poems. Which was quite scary. So that one I really remember. And the second one, I don't remember much of. It was the topic interview. Let's talk about the books I'd written about in my personal statement. And I just remember walking in and feeling it was a really awkward social faux pas in a way. The other guy had walked out, the academic was standing there, and I felt like he reached out to shake my hand. So I reached out mine, and then he put his hand down. And that was the beginning of the interview, and I was like, "Oh no, I've done something terribly wrong."
Why did I do this?
No, I don't think it was on purpose. I later learned he was quite a nervous guy as well. So I think it was probably the combination of the two. But I remember that being quite intimidating.
Yeah, definitely. So the first few seconds of the interview, that kind of, I remember being told that would, shape the way that your interview runs for the next hour. And I was so prepared to walk in the door and say, "Good morning, everyone," and shake the hands of everyone. But actually the person came to get me from the waiting room. And so I was like, I'm not prepared to have a 5-minute walking discussion before we get to the room. And I remember just being so stressed about that. So just be ready for anything, I guess.
Yeah. And also I think one thing that people forget is that the interview itself, they can't learn that much from you at an interview. They know that you're really stressed. They know that some people are going to be really trained for this and some people are really not. And so actually I think it's just to confirm some of the assumptions they've already made from your application. I think people put a lot of weight on the interview and they think if they interview badly it's over, all that sort of stuff, but I don't think that's the case.
That's a really good insight. I have to agree with it. They can't learn that much. Everyone's stressed. So I guess if they actually have those assumptions and they just want to tick.
They just want to confirm. And I think a big part of it is teachability. They want to know. I think that's a word. I think teachability is a word. I know, exactly. I was going to say. But I think people they really want to think if I had to do a one-on-one with this person every week, or if I had to have them in my small seminar group of 10 people, would they fit? And in a way, when they're putting together a year group, I'm sure they are kind of thinking about the dynamics they want to have within that, because you spend so much time, particularly with English in your college, so much of the teaching is done there, that it can be quite different.
I think that's exactly right. That's what we keep saying, the interview isn't just about you getting the right answers. It's just about them seeing how do you deal when there's new information that comes in? How do you deal with a new text or a question you're a bit unsure about? How can they lead you to the right question and to the right answer? Sorry, how do you get to that?
Yeah, and I think one big thing that I remember hearing all the academics complain about, which is maybe a good insider tip, was some people think that. Again, it comes with that initial point I said of some people think when they come for interview, they need to be perfect and they need to be they know everything about English and they are masters already at age 17. I think they probably hate that, the academics, because as I said, the purpose is that you're going to learn and get to a certain level in 3 years. By no means, the academics have been studying for their whole lives, so then you'll never get to their level. And even they are only specialists in tiny areas. But I think some people come in and feel the need to if they don't have knowledge about something to try and make up an answer or try and fluff something or whatever, but actually they're not expecting you to have answers for everything. If you have a creative way of answering a question, absolutely do it, but if you don't, it's perfectly fine to say, that's not something I've come across, but I have this insight from something else I've done.
Exactly.
I think
I think that's such a good...
and that's something that's really important when you're in a supervision, you're actually working, like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're making up stuff or trying to like impress without any substance. Because it's all about your degree at that point, right? Once you're in, it's not, you're not doing it for them.
It's one thing to come in with confidence and, come across well, but then another thing to come in with a bit of arrogance or, think that you know everything or think that you have to prove that you know everything. They absolutely do know that there's so much you still don't know.
Maybe a nice way of thinking about it, and it's probably harder to actually do this than to say it, but like to think that you actually want to come out of that interview having learned something from the interviewer, from that fellow, because ultimately that's what's going to happen if you get in, you have the next 3 years with them. You want to actually be able to take something from not take something from them in a mean way, but like,
No, it's just a mini supervision, so it is about learning.
Yeah, sure. Probe them. They have the knowledge. They're not going to not answer a question you ask them, right? Like,
yeah, that's true. So prep your questions beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that actually, so jumping ahead a bit, but like, doing job interviews and, I've interviewed a few people. I've obviously been interviewed a lot for new positions, and like having questions in your back pocket is just always a good thing. It's probably one of the things that can make you seem, the smartest, is to just have some really insightful things to bring out.
Yeah, just to show you're interested as well in what they do and what the job is like or what the college is like, etc.
And they almost always, like a job interview, almost always ask you at the end if you have any questions. And if you don't have any, like, it's not the end of the world, but like it's a bit of a waste of a wasted opportunity to show what you're made of.
For sure.
Definitely.
Did you come out of that interview feeling good then, or?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think anyone does really. Like, I think it's such a tough... Also, because like you think it's like a numbers game as well, right? Like everyone gets so obsessed over the stats, and like, which is I don't think a good way of thinking about it at all. But no, I don't think I came out of it with any real opinion. I think you would be wrong to come out thinking, or arrogant if you come out thinking like, I smashed that, it's gonna be great. Because as I said, it's such a tiny portion of your application.
That's true. And I guess just coming back to the course itself, and I'm assuming that most of your, work during the year or your exams are, essay based. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah. So
basically just essays.
Yeah, so we produced an essay every week for our supervisor.
Per course.
I'll tell you about the structure of the course. So first 2 years, we went through 6 different periods, basically going from 1300 to the present day. Very little flexibility there on what you want to study. The idea is to like throw you in at the deep end, master to a certain level like that period. What's interesting is that whilst like the topics are quite general, so it's like Renaissance or medieval or Shakespeare, who gets his own paper, which is a great one. You'll be taught by supervisors in your college mostly, and they'll all have their own specialisms. So you won't learn the same stuff that someone at a different college learns, and there isn't a general syllabus of the topics that come up in exams.
That's really interesting. So I guess your college really shapes your experience of English.
Absolutely, and like I think this is where English really differs to a lot of other subjects. It's very, very much. You can obviously direct. You have a lot of control on like what you want to study, and within a certain period, like they might say this week we're going to look at essayists in the long 18th century, which is one of the papers, and you can go away and research anyone you want. Like there's no syllabus, which sounds terrifying, but when you get to exams, it becomes a whole new skill to be able to like take this little piece of like really specialized knowledge you now have, like I said about preparing for an interview, and shape it into like a proper exam question. But yeah, so we've got those 6 papers kind of on a weekly basis. In those first 2 years, I had an essay for for the paper I was doing for that term.
Right. So
you do 8 essays every term, which is quite a lot, but manageable. And often like there wouldn't be an essay title. They would say like, write me an essay. And so you'd have to go away and like,
so different.
Which is really interesting. It was also like really, really helpful when I then went and did my master's, but or prepare for dissertations, because they train you from a very early stage to like write in like a kind of journal article format. You start to think about, okay, well, I'm not going to answer like what do fairies mean in Shakespeare or whatever, but you'd think about like a really interesting topic and then write like a piece around that topic, which is like, it very quickly takes you away from that school mentality of like every essay has to have like a very clear argument and be structured in a certain way, and like really makes you think about how is academic writing structured, how can you be part of like, even as a first year undergrad, like be part of like helping to shape how we understand a text.
So I guess it really, I'm just jumping forward here, but it really trains you to either become an academic or a sort of a journalist and having your own topics to research, and you just know you can talk about anything at any point.
Yeah, I think it does a few things. I think it makes you fiercely independent because you know that like you are in control of all those decisions, and you can always talk to your supervisors about like what would be a good area. But I always found I love the freedom of being able to like set my own parameters. That is a skill in itself. So the second part is that you get very, very good at like choosing good topics and understanding how far can you go in 3,000 words. Like what is a reasonable, like I'm not going to talk about like death and the Renaissance because that would be like 10 books, but like I can talk about a very specific text in a very specific way. Yeah. And I found that was a really great skill. But yeah, on top of doing those 8 essays, we also had weekly classes for practical criticism, which is a very practical criticism and critical practice. It's like a really big part of the Cambridge English tripos for undergrads, and it's basically all about unseen texts, getting very, very good at understanding, seeing patterns, and being able to analyze texts that you've only just come across. And then the critical practice part is being able to apply theories and literary theories to the texts that you've understood, but like in real time. It culminates in like quite a intense exam, which you have in part 1 and part 2. So that's your final exams as well, where you're given 3 hours, I think a booklet with like 30 texts. So it could be like tiny poems or little short stories or like paragraphs or adverts from like magazines or anything. And you have to compare them and like write an essay on the fly.
On all of them?
No, so you pick like a certain number based on the questions you want to do.
Wow.
But it's an amazing skill. Like, again, that makes you super nimble and super able to like, you know, see something new and immediately like go into a certain mode of how you're going to interpret that.
Makes even more sense now why they just handed you that poem during the interview.
Exactly. And that is the skill. Like, and that's where I don't know that much about the Oxford English undergrad, but I think that they obviously test those skills, but Cambridge is really big on this idea of practical criticism. Someone published a book, I think, in the early 20th century all about it, and it became like a really grounding principle of like how we learn.
This is like advertising for the English tripos for me.
I thought it was great.
It was really, the type of examining old English text and everything, but actually it's much more practical than I ever thought. It's so much more modern and like teaches you actual real life skills.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that's helped me even in my jobs to date has been the ability to like see something, get some, a series of pieces of information or whatever, understand very quickly what's important, and then be able to write something very quickly that responds to that. And that sounds like that's a skill that can go in so many different directions, but they teach you that from day one, which is when you're writing an essay, there's no way that you can like fully read 3 books, all the criticism on it, and then write an essay in a week. So you have to become very good at like, how can I extract the maximum amount of like, outcome from that without putting too much effort in and getting it done on time.
I bet whatever you read now is just like filtering out the information. What are the key points?
I read really fast now, which is like good and bad. It means sometimes you skip important things, but it's very useful for work.
It's cool, definitely. Can you tell us a bit more about why you stayed in Cambridge after you graduated from your bachelor's and decided to do this MPhil in modern and contemporary literature?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my second year, as part of the undergraduate tripos, you have to do a kind of a mini dissertation. It's 5,000 words, and you basically do it instead of doing an exam in some of the papers you've done.
Right.
And it's actually a really good opportunity to like start. It's kind of like a big long piece of coursework, but they call it a dissertation. It's actually like the perfect length for a journal article, which is quite a nice first experiment for that. And I was really lucky to have a great supervisor to work on for this piece. I was looking at Samuel Beckett, and I was also studying German at the time, and she mentioned to me that they'd just discovered these diaries that Samuel Beckett had written throughout his whole life in German and a bit of English. And they just kind of discovered them. Some academics in Reading were working on them, and it was like a really interesting new thing to look at. And so like I jumped into that and like started going to Reading every few weeks to have a look at the original like manuscript papers and like everything, and like worked with her very closely on this piece that did very well. And really just like realized that it was a much, much bigger topic than I could cram into 5,000 words. So I then did it again for my third year dissertation. I actually did 2 dissertations, which was an option.
Okay.
They're only 7,500 words, but you could do 2 or you could do another exam. I chose to do the dissertations. So I did that again. And then I decided that there was still way more to write about. So I proposed a master's thesis on Beckett and German in general, which was then, I think, 12,000 words, which is the final piece. So for me, it was like I really wanted to keep working with the same people. I knew that Cambridge had great funding for master's degrees and was a great environment to do that. The texts weren't in Cambridge. If I really wanted to do a very specific dissertation on Samuel Beckett's German diaries, I should have gone to Reading and done it there. But I really liked the way that the faculty thinks in Cambridge, the way that they deal with close reading and practical criticism. And I really wanted to write a dissertation that aligned with those values, and that analysed Beckett's texts, but in the way that the Cambridge faculty does.
How did you think about, just applying or suggesting your master's thesis? Did you talk with your supervisor and then she said you should do a master's, or?
Yeah, well, I felt like I had unfinished work. I mentioned that I did English because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And by the end of my third year, I didn't really know what I wanted to do still.
A problem that many of us had when graduating.
And I had this thing, I had this topic that I really, really enjoyed and that I could I knew there was way more to write about. And I thought it was an easy win to do an extra year and really be able to focus on that. I'm really glad I did because it was an amazing opportunity.
Definitely.
It's interesting that you were able to do a new topic rather than something that had been done many, many times before. And I know you mentioned you did a German paper. Is that quite standard when you study English? Or?
So there used to be a paper as part of the undergraduate degree that you could, if you wanted to, you could do a modern language, study literature from a different language. I think they got rid of that either the year before I started or a bit earlier than that because no one was doing it. So there's sad stories about no one learning languages anymore.
That's quite sad.
Yeah, but I'd done German at school and really enjoyed it, and wanted to find a way of continuing that. So they introduced a new scheme where you could swap out one of your undergraduate papers for a paper from another faculty. So I think you could do things like Latin or modern languages, or I think even philosophy or anthropology. There were little papers you could do. Again, nobody did it because it was quite a lot of faff to organise. And
you couldn't have done computer science or
no,
something
I
like
don't,
that. They had a set list of courses that you could have.
Yeah, I think there were 20 or 30 different courses you could do. And so I opted to swap it out. I think I had to make the decision in at the beginning of first year. Wow. And I didn't do it until the mid second year. So the turnaround was really, really slow.
Wow.
I had to commit very early on because they wanted to make sure that my German was a high enough level to be able to do it with the people who were actually studying German for their degree. So I had to do courses at the Language Academy in Cambridge, which I think college paid for, or the faculty. And then I also got funded to go to Berlin for 2 months, which is amazing, and study at the Goethe Institute, which I did in the summer of my first year, which was amazing. And I absolutely loved swapping out that paper. It was a real faff because the scheduling meant I had to do German lectures and English lectures during the same term. So I had a double term where I was doing 2 papers at once. And then the next term I had nothing to do. So the timings were a little bit difficult, but I really enjoyed it.
It's incredible they still facilitate that though, and funded you to even go to Germany and everything. But, timing can be a bit of an issue, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. They've got all of that funding and everything there. They make it relatively hard to access. You have to really know what you're doing I had some people who could help me find the right way to get the right money from the right sources. It's there, but it's not they publicize it a lot. So
I really relate to that. I think everyone should research all about their bursaries in their course, in their college, what they can get. Because I know, for example, there's they fund 3 people a year to go to Harvard.
Oh, that's Emma, right?
Cambridge. Yeah, Emma. Yeah. And also the whole university funds one person. Yeah. But you have to you really jump through hoops to get it. So it's crazy.
And I'll say Trinity were very good at, particularly when I was doing my master's, but actually because my undergraduate degree had some research elements, which was quite rare, they always gave me money to go to Reading, which was always very generous. So I'd have to write a proposal, but they'd cover my train fares and my expenses. So that was really supportive, and it meant I could afford to go to do more research than I otherwise would have been able to, which is great.
That's good. And I feel there's just this system kind of perpetuates a sort of barrier again to entry for people who might not know how to work the system and stuff like that, because it's just crazy that the oldest colleges often have the most money, like
Yeah.
Trinity, for example. So then you would say to those people who have less money to apply to those colleges, but then they're also generally the hardest to get into because there's so much competition. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, I can't speak for the admission statistics or anything. I mean, I do believe that the system does work well for redistributing people amongst colleges.
Mm-hmm.
I also think Trinity tends to attract a lot of science applicants. So I was attracted to it because I thought, which I think is probably the wrong way of thinking about it, actually. But like, I thought that it would be a good place to apply for English because of the resources. And if I was able to put up with the fact that it was very heavily science and maths focused, like I would still have a really good time.
Yeah, I think the resources and the support is available, but you have to know how to go about getting it. So yeah, important to do your research, I guess.
Yeah. So I guess, should we talk more about Trinity life?
Sure. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the first thing would be, could you just describe Trinity in like a sentence to someone who's never been to Cambridge, has no idea what Trinity is or means?
So Trinity is one of the largest, oldest, and I think richest colleges in Cambridge. It's right in the centre on Trinity Street. And I think there are about 600 undergraduates. So it's like 200 a year. It's like quite a big intake. It's quite famous for having, I think, like Newton, Byron, had some good English people. Tennyson was there. A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, he was there. And it's particularly well known for its maths intake and science intake, which is probably the majority of the college, I would say. There are lots of other, I think, there were like 10 English people each year, but there were like 40 mathematicians. So it's, very known for that.
There's quite a stereotype, isn't there, of like the Trinity Mathmo student.
Yeah, which I think does exist, but actually I would say actually it was a lot more balanced than I expected it to be. There are lots and lots of, there are another 10 historians as well. So actually I would say, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but in terms of like arts and sciences, I think it is more 50-50.
That's good.
It's just that they are very famous for, being involved in maths and science. And obviously there's a lot of money and research that's poured into those disciplines as well.
So I guess to sort of an outsider perspective is that Trinity, as you said, is like one of the old colleges, is really beautiful, is more of that Harry Potter vibes. But then we also have that impression that it's quite traditional and very academically focused, maybe a bit more academic pressure than some of the other colleges. So I don't know, having been there, what your view is on that.
So Trinity has a reputation, as you say, for being quite traditional, old-fashioned. I saw that. I saw the institutions and we have very traditional porters and the way, it's one of the only colleges where you can't walk across any grass and it's very old school in that way. I think it's one of the last colleges to offer lifelong tenure for academics. So it has a very aging, fellowship.
What does that mean? How would you become an academic?
It means if you're elected to become a fellow, you can stay there for your whole life.
That's crazy.
Which means that you end up having a lot of older academics, which can be great in many circumstances, but it means that the college as a whole was quite conservative, I would say, in terms of, compared to other colleges in the university. That said, there were some really big upsides for me. So, I mean, the fact it's quite big means that actually it's like having, you could say as an art student, I felt like I was going to a big mathsy college, but we had more art students than most colleges. So actually it felt, it was very easy to find people who you really liked. And with the resources of the college, I ran a cinema society and we put on outdoor screenings and, I was involved in the college magazine and there was lots of really fun stuff to get up to. So I think played right, it wasn't at all what I expected. I was expecting it to be much more scary and, a lot of academic pressure, that sort of thing. On the pressure point specifically, I didn't feel it that much. I know there's kind of this general Trinity feeling. There's all these rumours that they'll kick you out if you get a third or whatever, which I don't think are true in the very traditional sense, or they're not different to other colleges. I know that there's because maths is so competitive there, they compete for the number 1 ranking on the university, whatever. To be a wrangler. Yeah, all of that stuff. I know that's a big thing, but for English and I think for most of the arts, that was not really felt at all. And like I said before, around I felt like the English fellows there were all brilliant, and that's what really attracted me to it. Being able to be there, have the resource, great teaching, and also the fact that they were, I don't know if they still are, but when I was there, they were also paired with Clare College. So we also got taught by Clare academics, and Clare students could also be taught by Trinity academics. That was an amazing resource because it meant we had access to like really, really brilliant academics and way more topics to study as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it sounds like despite the academic pressure, they do actually help you perform really, really well in any case, like doing the one-to-one supervisions, like you said, or having super high standard academics there, maybe just the environment as well, that everybody else is also, I mean, in every college everybody's super academic, but maybe Trinity even more so. But...
yeah, and I felt like actually you could choose a path where you felt very academically pressured and where you worked 14 hours a day in the library and you did certain subjects. Like, I think you definitely could have that life at Trinity, and that's absolutely fine. Some people really want that and have those kinds of ambitions, but you also could have the path where you took advantage of like the arts teaching. I'm not saying it's better, it's just like what I particularly enjoyed. We're able to access amazing funds to do foreign trips and learn languages, and I think there was a nice path that you could take that really that was unexpectedly great for me.
And I feel like we haven't really talked about May Week and May Balls in this podcast quite yet. We're just reserving it for an episode. But
I see.
Trinity May Ball is the highlight of the year for everyone. And I guess you have like first dibs for tickets or guaranteed tickets.
Famously, So I think every member, which I guess is like undergraduate or postgraduate, gets a guaranteed pair of tickets.
Should we explain what May Week is?
Yes, I guess like we'll do a dedicated episode for it. But Cleo, can you just summarise what a May Ball is at Cambridge?
I can try. So I guess the weird thing about May Week is that it doesn't actually occur in May.
No.
Does anyone know the history behind that?
I think it's it now occurs in June. Then I think it's just because academic terms used to be shorter. But we will fact check this.
Fact check this one. But yeah, it's basically a whole week of balls and garden parties and amazing events that every single college puts together after exams. And it's what every student at Cambridge is actually looking forward to, and what sort of motivates you to keep going during exam term, which is very difficult. You just know there's that light at the end of the tunnel where you'll be able to go to your college's May Week event. So yeah, we've both been to Trinity May Ball. I mean, you obviously have been every single year.
I was very lucky.
It's definitely a big event. It's one of the best.
So you definitely you pay a fee for the ticket, and then on the night it just includes everything like drinks, entertainments, activities,
fireworks,
and you're obviously dressed in black ties, so men are generally in suits and women are generally in like long ball dresses, ball gowns. And it's just quite amazing, and that's really specific to Cambridge as well.
No, Trinity they do an amazing ball, and it's all run by students as well, so the committee is pretty impressive. They pull it off whilst doing exams as well.
It's crazy, and that's how I guess tickets are very expensive considered to what students might be expected to pay for a party, because it is just a big party, but I guess for having organised the May Week event at my college, like the prices are that low because we don't get paid doing it. If people got paid to plan this event, the tickets would be just...
It's like... I find it hard to say it's good value for money, because it is like a display of like opulence, and it is a little bit... Definitely. I think now when I look back on it, like having left, I'm like, wow, that was... I can't ever imagine doing something like that now. But in the moment, I mean, for me, the most important thing was, the week up to May Week... Actually, I really remember this with my master's thesis, because my hand-in date was the Monday of Trinity May Ball in June. And I remember like walking up and down in Trinity, there's a court at the back where the first, court of the May Ball is. And I remember seeing them like putting up the May Ball tents and everything whilst I was still like pacing up and down, like trying to finish my dissertation. And there's something incredible about like, for one night, this place that has been all about stress and academics and, deadlines becomes like kind of a magical place for you.
I'm having chills just thinking about it.
When you're at these events, looking at the fireworks or whatever, you just think it was all worth it. All the pain. So it's a nice end to the year.
And I guess the thing with Trinity is it's very hard to get tickets, because Trinity is a big college. These events are quite limited in terms of how many people can go. So if you're at Trinity, you're guaranteed a pair. otherwise it's quite hard to get a pair unless you know people.
So I guess freshers who join Trinity, beware, you might have a lot of people who want to be friends with you. In order to get a ticket at the end of the year. I mean, there's been I feel like a sort of rumor, I don't know whether you've ever seen it happen, where someone just starts dating a member of Trinity just to get tickets for like Maples, but it's quite funny. But I think that kind of wraps up your experience at Trinity, and then I want to talk specifically about you and your life at Cambridge. You did you were part of so many societies. I guess Varsity maybe was the biggest one in your life. Should we start with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say like in my first year, I felt like, you know, everyone who joined, you feel like quite a lot of pressure. You're thrown at the deep end. You really don't understand like you go from like being marked on essays and being told like what is good and what isn't to like very, very vague feedback. And the academics know you'll be good someday, but like they're not really like coaching you along in the way that you're really conditioned to be at school.
Yeah.
So first year I remember like me and most people in my cohort, like we just, you know, buckled down and like just worked loads. And I really regret that now actually, because I realized like it probably didn't make any difference to how I ended up like doing later on. But I missed out on a lot of the extracurricular stuff. So the end of my first year, I started, I was involved in my college magazine. Me and a few friends took it over. And then I knew someone who was working for Varsity, which is the student newspaper. Varsity is quite special because it's only one of 2 independent student newspapers in the UK. And what that means is actually a private company. It's not run by the university. They have their own office, they have their own computers, and they actually print a physical newspaper, like 10,000 copies every week during term time.
Wow.
So it's like almost if you're editor, which I was for a term with a friend, like it's absolutely a full-time job. But it's an incredible like opportunity if you really want to get involved in journalism, but also like if you just want to be involved in like a big scale project like the Maples, like being involved with Varsity can be really brilliant. And like, you know, we got picked up by loads of national newspapers. We had people like Jon Snow came, we interviewed him. So it's like a really cool thing to, cool's maybe not the right word, but really interesting thing to be a part of. And like,
I think it's cool.
But I was involved in the college magazine. I did lots of design work. I've always been interested in graphic design and print layouts. So I did all of that, and then was asked to come and assist with the newspaper because they didn't have anyone. And like, you know, you're using the same technology like the Guardian, the Times are using. So it's like pretty high tech stuff.
Wow. How do they fund everything?
Through advertising. Okay. So they have a part-time business manager who's, I say adult, we're all adults, but like a proper non-student adult.
Okay.
And it's all funded through that. You know, there are ads throughout the paper, but it's not that expensive to print a paper like that. And no one gets paid, so except him, he gets paid. But
it's an actual job experience then, like proper...
It was amazing. So I got involved with that. I started off as like I was given a section to edit. I think I did culture for a while, features for a while, and then I was asked to run the magazine. So there's a little magazine inside it, and I redesigned that. And then me and a friend who'd met at Varsity were like, we want to take this to the next level. And so we we spent a summer redesigning the whole paper from start to finish.
That is crazy.
He'd like done internships at like some newspapers and like learned about their style guides, and like we tried to like up it and competed with the other like online newspaper in Cambridge, the Tab, which we beat them in the second week, so that was great in terms of online stuff. And I mean, it was nuts. I was like in the office from like on Wednesdays and Thursdays from like 6 a.m. until 1 a.m. We went to print at like 11 p.m. on Thursdays. And we always like were right on like the press would be calling us being like, we need this page now.
Wow.
But then like I'd stumble back to my room, wake up the next morning at like 9 or 10, and outside my front door there would be like a copy of the paper I'd made, which was like an incredible experience.
That's crazy. And so you don't actually need like journalism experience. Say, I don't think I could ever write for a newspaper, but I'm actually realizing that there's way more to it than, you can do graphic design or... Yeah,
there's so like an edit. I mean, lots of people who are involved in Varsity weren't initially writers. A lot of people were. So there's a big news team. Everything was had open submissions, every single section. So typically for culture, we'd send out an email every week and say like, who wants to write about this film, whatever. So anyone could write in. I managed to kind of... I think I was the first, I must be one of the first editors to get in with only like one piece ever published in Varsity. Because usually like it takes a while to move through the ranks and you have to have written a lot of stuff, but I think my design stuff kind of helped me.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely don't need to have that experience. And I know now they're doing lots of web stuff, they're doing lots of video stuff. Still see a little bit of it. So lots of, I think there's a podcast as well. Yeah, but it was a really amazing experience, and completely absorbing in a way that might have been a bit detrimental to my work, but was also really fun.
I was just going to ask about that. I know this is going back to studying, but it's really impressive. How did you manage to do both? And like, I know you did even more things on top of that, but how did you balance it all?
I think the thing with Cambridge is you start to learn that, it's these 8-week terms that are like unbelievably intense, and then you can just like do nothing for the holidays. And I think after the first year, where I was probably spending like 5-6 days with like the people in my English set in the library, like no natural light, like trying to bash out this essay, I realised that actually you can do them, you could get like a pretty good essay done in a lot less time, if that makes sense. You start to work out what you need to do to make the essay, how to craft a great title, how much research you need to do, and then you could like compartmentalize that a bit. And so I was, I guess my answer is like I did less academics and found a way to like fit in Varsity stuff. I mean, Varsity was at least 3 full days a week that I just couldn't do any academic stuff. And English, you're lucky with English because the lectures are all optional, which is good and bad. I've got a lot of feelings about the lectures because they were really interesting, but they were very rarely linked to what we were actually studying. Because they'd be about like the paper we were studying, which could be like 300 years worth of literary history. But actually like that week I might be writing on something that the academic at my college has an interest in. So very rarely would like a lecture align with my actual work. It was more just to like go and absorb stuff.
That is so strange.
Yeah, it was really, and so when I did the German paper, like it was amazing that like I did like, I don't know, like 10 lectures or 8 lectures, and every one of them was like aligned with something that I was studying. And I just took notes and then did the exam. But,
that's the normal.
Yeah.
Definitely. I almost forgot you guys had lectures because with all your supervisions and stuff, that must be so different, and because it varies between colleges on what you actually study. So I guess you do still have the option of meeting people from different colleges in your course by going to lectures.
Yeah. Although I did think that was something that I thought could have been better, I guess, with English. Like it was very college based.
Right.
Not until third year really, when we started having, in third year it becomes a bit more faculty based, because you can take these papers that there's lots of options, and you can take papers that cross lots of different time periods, and so then you'd have seminars, which is a bit more like the master's degree a bit.
Okay.
But
so
until
they're just
then,
smaller scale lectures.
Effectively, yeah, or like the more like seminars, like classes and things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was, at least in the first 2 years, it felt very much like the only people I knew who did English were like the 10 people in my college.
Yeah. Wow, that is different. And I guess we always keep learning because we had no idea this is how the English course was structured.
No.
But yeah, going back to your activities, sorry.
Yeah,
so you also did videography?
Yeah, so I also did a lot of film stuff. I've been making films since I was a kid, so I was like, I really wanted to do that more at Cambridge. I didn't do a lot for my first 2 years, but then I started working on a few film projects. There's a great film society. People like theatre. I'm sure someone will talk about theatre on this podcast.
Minnie has already
really?
talked about
Brilliant.
theatre
of
on
course,
this podcast, yeah.
Film was really up and coming and not starting to rival, but like I think in the future it will start to rival the sorts of things being done by the ADC and by the theatre scene.
Mm-hmm.
People renting, you could get money from college to support your films. We could rent professional equipment, learn loads, make loads of films, screen them in the theatre, that sort of thing. So there was a great little ecosystem for that. Yeah. I did a bit of that, and then I also started making trailers for theatre shows as well, which is quite a fun little side project to do. Meet with the director of the show, understand how to cut something that's kind of 30 seconds long, and produce something that will help them boost their ticket sales. So
that's really cool. And because there's also it just reminds me of another person we know who started doing videography and then just ended up doing all the films to promote Varsity trip, the annual ski trip, and now pretty sure they are just a full-time videographer and working for that. So
it's an amazing opportunity to get experience for sure.
Maybe that leads well into how did your course prepare you for what you're doing now? Because it's quite interesting that you can do all these outside activities outside of your course as well, and then you might end up working in something like that rather than what your course actually taught you. But how did you transition from like university to career?
Well, I think when you say you're studying English, everyone always goes like, oh, you're going to be like a teacher or a librarian or an academic, like, which is a bit depressing. And actually, I don't know anyone, or a journalist. I know I've got a friend who's become a really successful journalist, so she's doing well. That's good.
Nice. But you never wanted to be an academic?
No, well, I mean, I did the masters, and whilst I was doing the masters, was trying to kind of test the waters a little bit and see how I felt about it. I'm not sure. Maybe in the future I'll go back and do something more. But at the moment, I really felt that, I enjoyed the topic I was doing, but I was ready to move into the real world.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky that in my second year, I think when I was writing that first dissertation, it was like the Easter holidays. I was back home. I was in a cafe writing my dissertation, and I overheard a guy talking about a new startup that he was trying to found. And I asked him if I could be his intern for the holidays.
What, just like that?
Yeah, he like knocked my coffee over, and it was like a really non-English thing and like very not me thing to do, but I just like, the idea sounded amazing. It was all about connecting locals with travelers and like building really hyper-local like city guides effectively. And I was just really into it, and he said sure. He asked me if I'd drop out of university. I said no. But I started interning at this startup and very quickly became like, I effectively ended up helping to set it up. When I joined, they had one city, and then over that summer I built 150 more cities for them. And like, so I already had this kind of taste for work, I guess, throughout the final 2 years of my undergrad, and then during my masters where I did a bit more. And so actually, like, after that, I immediately went into a full-time position with that company. Okay. And I started managing all of our partnerships and all of our global stuff. So that was, I think I was lucky in that I got to kind of see how my skills were complementary quite early on and develop that skill set whilst I was still studying in my holidays and things like that. And then when I finished my masters, like, go straight into a job, which I really enjoyed. I think it was interesting because actually a lot of the skills that I still use today working in operations, like, they are still very linked to the skills that I learned in my degree. But if you'd asked me when I first started, like, if I thought I'd work at like a tech startup, I never would have believed it, because people think it's so, like, you either need to be like an amazing coder or, you know, a great graphic designer to be able to do that. And it's not true.
I think that is key to remember when you're choosing your university course as well. I know it's a super stressful time, and I had no idea what I wanted to do after university. So picking a university course was quite difficult. And of course, it's going to influence and impact potentially your career and how you do at uni and whatnot. But you do have to remember that you can do pretty much anything after you finish anyway, if you're going to one of these courses that leave your options open. So, you know, from English to a tech startup, and I'm in finance, but I studied psychology. So you can't something completely different. So at least choose something that you're very interested and passionate about at university and enjoy that. And then later on, you know, unless you want to be a neuroscientist or something very specific, then it might not actually matter that much what you study at university. Yeah,
I think that's so important. I think being able to, it goes back to the first thing I said, right? It's so important that you find something that you're really interested in, and you can, I keep trying to not use the word obsessed because I know it has like a negative side, but I think there is something around like really wanting to get to the bottom of it and like master that skill, master that area. For me, that was like Samuel Beckett in Germany, you know, which now is not part of my life. Like, I'm really glad I did it. It was a brilliant experience, but it was like, in a way, it was like a tiny little startup, you know, like an idea I had, a thing that took me 2-3 years to put together. I had to do lots of research. I had lots of false starts. I had to work with lots of different people. And all of those like learnings that you have in the safe environment of university are so helpful when you go out and, start a career. And I definitely think that it's helped me so much so far, particularly with, you know, in my line of work, like, I'm constantly presented with new problems, new ideas, things like that. And, you know, the rigor of like a weekly supervision on like having to become a master in a topic in 6 days even, is something that's just so useful in the real world.
The transferable skills are real that you get from Cambridge or university.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of have 2 questions. I don't know which one to start with, but just on your overall time at uni, would you remember what was the happiest moment or happiest day in your life at uni? And then on the other side of the coin, do you have just one big regret that you wish if you could go back in time? What would it be? So I guess I don't know which one you want to pick first.
Let's do the regret first.
Okay.
Get that out of the way. I think, I touched on it earlier, but I think I wish I had taken work a little bit less seriously in my first year. I don't think I did it. I wasn't crazy, like staying in the library at all hours, but I definitely think I thought that if I worked more hours than the library and like was quite almost like performative with the amount of effort I was putting into my degree, like that would make me a better student. And actually what I learned is actually making myself busier was a really great thing. And it forced me to be much more careful with my learnings and like actually much more successful. I'm not sure that's for everyone. Some people really love working long hours and that's really good for them. But for me specifically, like I wish I'd gone out in my first term and like auditioned for plays and like played more music and been involved with Varsity earlier, like all of those things, because I think I would have gotten a lot more out of it. That's why I had to do that fourth year to make up for the first year. You know?
And a lot of people, I think, who do a fourth year are kind of taking opportunities that they just didn't get to do in the previous year. So I think that's a great point. Yeah, so
that's probably the biggest regret. In terms of best days, it's tough. Can I have two?
You can have two, absolutely.
I think there are a few little moments. So a few things. So there's kind of a boring one, which is why I want to have a more exciting one after. I remember my first supervision with the supervisor who had become my dissertation supervisor. And I just remember it was the first supervision I had. It was second term of my second year. And like, I had never been so excited about like study or anything. Like it was like an electrifying, I can't even like, it sounds so nerdy and boring, but like, it was so exciting to like be in this room with this academic who I really respected. We were talking about something that neither of us had like a grounding in, but we both found really fascinating. She had like an amazing set of knowledge on adjacent things. And it just felt like the beginning of something really exciting. And I still remember that sensation, walking out being like, whoa, like my like, you know, Cambridge world just changed. Like I'm now going to focus on this. The other one was kind of linked to my regret actually, but 2 years later in my fourth year, or my master's year, I was involved with two comedians who did a comedy show. And we became a bit of a trio, and it was like a 50% film, 50% live action comedy show.
Wow.
And, you know, we spent like 3-4 months like shooting all these amazing scenes. And I just remember the first night in the Corpus Corpus Playroom, which is, it's like a small theatre. And I just remember that opening night thinking like, no, I finally done this. Like I actually got involved with like theatre, with comedy. We shot something amazing. We were sold out. Everyone loved it. And we then took it to the Fringe the next year.
What?
And did a little tour around London and all that stuff. So that was like a real, like, I felt like I'd like made the most of it before I left, which felt great.
That's really good. That's such a happy memory to have.
Yeah, it was really great.
So many opportunities around Cambridge to take advantage of, and you know, you don't want to live with regrets and think, oh, there's so many things I actually wanted to try. You know, you don't have to do everything, but if there's a few things you're quite interested in, you haven't had a chance to do before, then Cambridge is the place.
Yeah. And I guess that, I don't know whether we want to end with this. I know you've already given so many tips to like your past self. If you could ever go back, would you have any tips for, you know, students starting out now and looking at universities, or just starting out at university? What would be your number one tip?
Oh, that's going to be really hard. I would say, I would say the way that like teaching and admissions works at Cambridge, from how I saw it, it's actually a very human process. And I think a lot of people, when they're applying, I know I definitely did this, like, and all my friends at school, we'd like look at the admission statistics site and like trying to work out the ratio of like how many places to applicant and all of that stuff. I wish that didn't exist, because I think it's stupid to have it up there. And it means people are like picking colleges based on like what they think their likelihood of getting in is. And that's really wrong, because actually you're not, you know, each student is not exactly cookie cutter to everyone else. If every single person was the same, sure, and you've got like a 1 in 10 chance or a 1 in 3 chance, like you pick the 1 in 3 chance place. But I think it's far more important that you actually think about, you know, it sounds so cliche, but like really focusing on your interests, on what you're really excited about, because that will shine through in an interview. Trying to, you know, pretend you know everything, or trying to like, you know, be someone who you're not will not shine through. But actually being really teachable, being really curious, excited, and showing that you've actually been really independent and found something you really like already. I think those are all things that will set you apart. And then it doesn't matter which college you apply to in terms of numbers, because if you're good, they'll want you.
So inspiring.
There we go. My
Thank
inspiring
you
piece.
so much for all the students
No,
that are
no,
listening
not
to
at
it.
all.
That is a great tip. And yeah, just thank you so much for sharing your life experience with us. I speak for both of us when I say that it was just really interesting and amazing to learn about all that you did, all that you're still doing and achieving. So yeah, thanks, Callum.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you.